You've probably noticed how watching a person endure pain makes you squirm with discomfort just by watching. In fact, you're probably squirming now, aren't you? Or how about watching an outpouring of emotion, even fictionalized, making a person's eyes well up? It happens with positive feelings too, like when you see a complete stranger laughing wholeheartedly. An absent-minded smile may spread across your face as if on its own. Psychologists, neuroscientists, and philosophers have long wondered why we react so strongly to the actions and experiences of others. In the early 1990s, a team of Italian researchers observed an unexpected phenomenon during a brain study. The scientists found that when a lab monkey watched another monkey perform an action, the same individual brain cells would react as if they had performed the action themselves. If watching an action and performing that action can activate the same parts of the brain in monkeys down to a single neuron, then it makes sense that watching an action and performing an action could also elicit the same feelings in people. These matching brain cells were named mirror neurons, and they could provide a neurological reason for why we feel empathy. In 1723, long before neurological activity was being measured, Adam Smith was born. Smith's father died shortly before his birth. He would form a strong bond with his mother, living with her for most of his life. He would never marry. He attended the University of Glasgow, then Oxford, and eventually returned to Glasgow as a professor of moral philosophy, a field we might now call ethics. Smith was popular among the student body, and his lectures were well received. He was known to be able to speak on his topics of expertise with great confidence and knowledge, though he lacked much by way of style or flair. In fact, Smith was the archetype for the bumbling professor. He was absent-minded, clumsy, and often spoke to himself. Despite all this, he completed and saw his first book published in 1759, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. The book was a culmination of Smith's thoughts and theories on human relationships, from society at large to commercial relationships to family members and friends. Smith argued that while humans may be self-interested, that doesn't mean we're selfish. And just as it displeases us to see someone suffer, it pleases us to see someone feel good too. Adam Smith proposed a theory of sympathy to explain how the human conscience develops. Morality, the difference between right and wrong, is not an absolute. Instead, Smith described morality as the result of people's natural inclination to seek approval and avoid disapproval in society. Based on this feedback, people form habits and customs which come to guide their conscience.
We endeavour to examine our own conduct as we imagine any other fair and impartial spectator would examine it.
Smith's impartial spectator was a metaphor for each person's conscience, a voice which attempts to predict the approval or disapproval of others. Striving for this mutual sympathy of sentiments is what compels people to form societies, develop cultures, and unite in economic relationships.
Everyone come in. Right this way. Hi. Thank you for coming. Hi, how are you? Hi, welcome. Hi, any seat.
This economics experiment is meant to see what prompts taking actions of goodwill and how those acts are reciprocated. Each person is anonymously paired with another in the room. They will take turns during the game, and the outcome of each player's actions will decide how much money is paid to the paired players. The first person to take a turn in each pair is presented with two options: end the game with each player winning $12, or pass the turn on to player 2. Player 2 is then given two options: Option 1 would end the game with player 1 receiving $18 and player 2 getting $30, so both would benefit, but especially player 2. Or Option 2, which also ends the game, but with player 1 only getting $6 while player 2 makes off with $64. 55% of player 1s chose Option 2, trusting player 2 would act for their mutual benefit rather than picking the greater payday at their expense. In the end, 67% of player 2s chose mutual benefit rather than the larger payout. The players were all anonymous and paid discreetly, and yet, even with no fear of retribution or ill effect on their reputation, the majority were still compelled to act for the benefit of a complete stranger. These results confirm Adam Smith's belief in people's sympathetic nature, but he knew there were limits to people's sympathy. Smith presented this view with a parable of an earthquake in China. Suppose you learn of a great disaster in a far-off land which has resulted in the death of thousands. As news spreads, you become engrossed in the people's plight. The photos and video only make the tragedy more real. You see images of anguished people, and it moves you to imagine the depth of their loss. Family members killed, homes destroyed. You too treasure these things and you sympathize. But in the peace of your own life, your mind strays and soon some comparatively meaningless task distracts you, pushing your concern for the far-off tragedy to the back of your mind. And were a more serious personal disturbance to present itself, then all thoughts of the far-flung disaster would vanish. While people are naturally inclined to share sentiments with each other, the reality, of course, is that sympathy with others fades the farther we are removed from them. A person naturally sympathizes most with family members and friends, while giving a lesser priority to the needs of a stranger. And yet we live in societies made up of hundreds of millions of strangers, all interacting in peaceable, orderly ways.
Society may subsist among different men, as among different merchants, from a sense of its utility without any mutual love or affection. And though no man in it should owe any obligation or be bound in gratitude to any other, it may still be upheld by a mercenary exchange of good offices according to an agreed valuation.
From store clerks to foreign clients, commerce makes up the majority of our interactions with strangers. In this way, trade civilizes us. It allows us to coexist peacefully even without the bonds of family, friendship, or community. The very nature of trade is sympathetic, providing it isn't forced. Bargaining with another person implies some parity of self-interest. It is an acceptance that the person with whom you trade has their own self-interest which must be met in order for yours to be satisfied. However, just as surely as most people heed the impartial spectator and act in sympathy with others, there are always those who don't. So what maintains order when sympathy falls short?